Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is SewRena, and in today's video we're going to be making a mid-century modern gingerbread house. I did this for the first time last year and I made my house from scratch, including designing the entire house. This year I put more focus on recording the actual making of the gingerbread house. So we're going to skip over the design process. If you want to see a full video on the design, you can check out my Patreon where I did the whole planning and designing over there. But today we're just going to focus on all of the building of the gingerbread house because I missed out on a lot of that last year because it caused me great stress and frustration, which I do not plan on going through this year. So if you're interested in seeing me make this house from scratch, also keep in mind that I also designed the house, then go ahead and like and subscribe and let's get into the video. I hope you have a wonderful holiday and I hope you guys make some really fun holiday crafts as well. I just got back from the grocery store. I had to pick up some ingredients for the gingerbread house. I was running low on sugar, brown sugar, flour. Basically, I just re-upped a bunch of the things that I knew I was going to need and I was probably going to run out of after making like one batch. So I just wanted to get it what I needed so I could just stay home and bake as much as possible because this is going to be anywhere from 12 to 15 hour project. So I just wanted to get it out of the way. So we're gonna head back into the house yeah, and start baking. It is time to start baking, and this video is going to take place with over about a week's time span, so I'm going to be baking whenever I have free time to bake. And right now, as you can see that most of the house is dark, it is nighttime. So over on the stove, I'm melting butter, sugar, adding my molasses, and getting that all warm, and then I move it over to the mixer. Make sure that you're using your metal bowl and not your glass bowl, at risk of breaking your glass bowl. So I use the metal bowl for most of this, and then I use the glass bowl for the icing later. I will leave a link in the description box for the recipe of this gingerbread dough that I'm using. This is a construction grade gingerbread dough, so it's not very suitable for eating. I used this recipe last year and I wasn't super fond of it. However, I wanted to make sure that it wasn't just me because last year I made a lot of mistakes, so I did it over this year so I could really gauge if I liked the recipe or not. I probably won't use this again next year. I'm not even sure if I'll make another gingerbread house at this scale next year, but I did go ahead with the same gingerbread recipe because I was pressed for time. One change that I did straight away was to get a rolling pin that allowed me to set the thickness of the dough. So I used a 1/4 inch thickness, and the only change I would do this time was get a longer version of this rolling pin. My local store only had the short version, but I was able to get even depths of cookie dough doing this way, and so they baked evenly, and ultimately the cookie came together and was a lot stronger than last time. Now I am cutting out my walls of the gingerbread house. When you're doing really large pieces, I highly recommend that you work on parchment paper so that way you can just transfer the paper directly to your cookie sheet and not have to risk stretching the dough or it being disformed or misshapen when moving it, since you want your pieces to stay as square as possible. One thing I noticed this go around, since I allotted more time for making this, the process was a lot smoother. This is the next day, and I wanted to share that this is the molasses gingerbread and this is the dark syrup, the Caro syrup gingerbread. The molasses is a lot darker, so if you're gonna be going with a more naked gingerbread then and you want the traditional color, then I would go with the darker color. I'm covering my cookie completely, so it doesn't matter that they don't match. However, the Caro corn syrup is a lot cheaper than molasses, so if you're covering the entire cookie or color doesn't matter, I would definitely go with that instead. In the last clip, I showed you the roof, the side walls, and the fireplace. So now I am cutting out the front and back walls of the house and I should be done. The front of the gingerbread house has 3 large diamond shaped windows, and as you can tell from the shape of the house that the roof is at a slant. I learned last year that if I'm going to have a really long roof that I'm going to need to reinforce it so that way it doesn't have so much weight on the roof, especially since I do completely flood my cookies. I find that because of the added weight of the icing, it does tend to want to snap on you. So I'm going to show you how I reinforce my roof and the walls of this gingerbread house since I learned from before. Before baking your gingerbread cookie, you want to make sure that you refrigerate it for at least 30 minutes so that way it can get quite cold and it reduces how much it spreads, if any, in the oven. So far things are going so smooth. I did have some damaged pieces that I had to bake more than once. For instance, I had to make this one 2 times, and I think I made several roof pieces and inside wall pieces, and that was mainly because I was being extra careful and I wanted to make sure I could get the best shape possible. Also, it's important that you make some extra wall pieces so you can use them as supports later. I am so close to being done baking and I'm so excited to move on. So I have to go back to the grocery store. This is day 3. I'm gonna go grab some powdered sugar to make the royal icing. I need another container of molasses because my last cookie cracked, so I have to replace that one. And I guess some little candies for decorating and stuff like that. So that's what we're gonna go do. Oh, and some Isomalt to do the windows. So we're gonna go do that now. We are back, and this time in the dining room. I am working on flooding the sidewalls with yellow. We decided to go with a pale yellow house this year, and I think this is gonna be really good. You can't tell from this video because it's so hard to pipe and be in frame of the video, and so I'm extra wobbly here, but it ends up looking good, trust me. It is the middle of the night and we are going to be decorating by stove light. So I went ahead and scored where the door and the fireplace is going to be, so that way I can make sure that I don't pipe in those areas, and I just use a sharp knife for that to just barely scratch the surface. This is where the nerves really come in because I started with the side walls and every other wall before working on the front so I could get good practice with piping. Last year was the first time that I piped. This is only year 2 and these are huge pieces of cookies. So yeah, my nerves are pretty bad, but I think I did a really good job for my second try at a skill that is underdeveloped. Once again, my lines are super wobbly because I'm trying to make sure that the camera can pick up what I'm doing while also making sure that I move quickly so everything really blends together. The best piping I did was on one of the roofs because I did that off camera, so I was really able to get up and close, like super close to it. Like my eyeballs were like inches away from the cookie and I was really able to get that good. But I wanted this year for me to get as much detail shots of me making the cookie and putting it all together, because last year I ended up in a ball of tears at this point and I didn't want to record that, right? I'm not that YouTuber. So this time I really wanted to capture it. And also last time I did flood the entire cookie in pink and then I scraped it off. And this time I was like, whatever I end up with is exactly what I'm keeping, because last time I think I made it worse than just leaving it be. So this time I learned that I still needed to work a little further away from the edges, and also I went in with a toothpick to kind of smoothen out some of the pieces, because on the shorter pieces I was able to tap the cookie for the air bubbles to pop and everything to level out. Because this has like giant triangular or diamond shaped holes in it, I didn't want to tap the cookie and risk snapping it. But as you can see, things are starting to look better. It was kind of a disaster at first, don't you think? So now I am working on the door. I end up not using this cookie piece because what I realized is since I am using a external fireplace, I didn't want the fireplace and the door to have the same thickness. It wasn't very realistic for the door to stick out just as far as the fireplace. So I guess this just served as practice, because then I ended up just scoring this exact shape and design onto the cookie and redoing it over there. And I wanted it to have like a double door and a starburst, but I tried the starburst and it looked awful, so I just left well enough alone and had like that little circular knob. It should be like a double door, if that makes sense. It is the next day. All of the cookies have been flooded and have set, so now it's time to go in with a stencil that I made using the Cricut. I did not have the right blade for this, so the stencil has some flaws in it, but I'm going to work with what I have anyway because I don't want to spend any more money on this project. So I made some teal, like a very light teal blue icing, and I'm going in with the stencil to make brick on the fireplace. And now I'm putting that same brick on the front of the house, and I also do the same on the sides of the house as well. If you haven't guessed already, I want this house to match my kitchen, so we're going with a yellow, pink, and teal blue theme for this. I wasn't sure how I wanted to cover the front of the house, so I'm so glad that at the very last minute I came up with this brick stencil because I think it really just ties the pieces together. Plus, I chose a brick pattern that's very similar to my actual mid-century home, and now I am pouring the Isomalt. This came out perfect the very first time that I did this last year, and for whatever reason, this just did not turn out well this year. The Isomalt refused to set, so I had to improvise later on, and I'll tell you what I did. Now I am piping some wreaths with some icing, some royal icing, and I'm embellishing with these little candy pearls, and then I let it sit so that way I can use these wreaths later. Last year I went overboard with all of the decoration and exterior candies, but this year I wanted to go simple because I was very proud of what I was able to do. So these are all of the pieces. They are ready to go. I even have some extras. There's a little bit of cracking on it because when I moved it, it started to crack on the icing, not the actual cookie. But other than that, I'm really happy with how it turned out. I plan on filling in that gap with the wreath on the fireplace, the gap in the stencil. And so, yeah, now it's time for me to start placing it on the board. I'm using a plywood board so that way I can move it around the house. Once I'm done working on it, I can put it on my little tea cart later so I can roll it around the house. I did not have help this time. Last time Mr. SewRena was home, he was on a business trip this time, so I had to do it all on my own, which was even more nerve-wracking because we messed it up with two people last year, and I couldn't even imagine doing this all on my own. And this is pretty much where the breakdown happened last year because everything was going wrong. So in order to tackle this by myself, I went ahead and piped some royal icing on the bottom of the board, like right underneath the cookie. So all I had to do was stand it up and it would be on top. Then I used a canister, a heavy canister, to use as a brace to hold the wall up as I worked. And then I continued to do the same thing on the other pieces, adding the royal icing to the bottom of the cookie and then attaching it at the side walls. I know a lot of people recommend that you use sugar, like a melted sugar, as a glue for this, but that only works if you don't already pre-decorate your gingerbread house cookies. And I highly recommend that you pre-decorate so that way you don't have to fight gravity and have all of your icing and everything like slip off the side of the house. So this is the inside, and I use the extra cookies as little braces. So as you can see, the cookie could pretty much stand on its own without the royal icing, and that's how I managed to do this by myself without help. Don't forget to caulk the inside of the house as well for more stability. And now it's time to add the roofs. Now, given the nature of cookies, I did have to make some alterations to my original plans because all of the pieces did not bake perfectly square. So as you can see, there's some exposed edges on the corners. The sidewall should have been on the outside, and also that added roof piece should have been sitting on top of the roof. That's why there's that cutout with no icing. But because it wasn't as wide as it should have been, or another piece was wider, I had to put the roof or the chimney on top of the actual fireplace. So now we're going to cover up that gap with a wreath, and we're just going in with little details to cover up the spots and flaws. To cover up that exposed edge of the gingerbread house, I decided to go with some white chocolate breeze blocks that I made last year and had in the refrigerator, and that covered up that edge. And at this point, the isomalt is completely dripping out of the windows. They're slowly oozing out, so I made sure to push it backwards. And when I woke up in the morning, the isomalt was completely gone. So in this shot, there is no windows in this house. And I was a little sad, but also still so happy with how nicely this gingerbread house came out. And I did not have to overcompensate with candy canes and all the other things that I did last year to cover up all of the flaws. I feel like for the most part, this came out so much better. I did add reinforcements to the roof a little bit, but I still noticed some sagging, so I ended up going back in, taking the roof off and adding some wooden paint sticks for more strength. Then I set the roof back on top and everything was good. It's been a couple weeks now and the roof is still doing really well. It's holding up really nicely. And as you can see, we have windows again because I had some rice paper in my pantry. So I slipped that in, and now that the isomalt has melted, it kind of looks like frosty ice on a windowsill, and it looks like frosted ice in the windows. Once I was sure that the house was stable, I went to the store and picked up some string lights, and now we have lights inside of the house, and the gingerbread house is complete, and I am so proud of it. If you have not already, please consider liking and subscribing to my channel. If you would like to support the channel any further, you can leave me a virtual tip over on Ko-fi or become a bobbin over on Patreon, where you can get exclusive videos and sneak peeks on upcoming projects. I cannot thank you guys enough for your support. If you would like to see the design process of my gingerbread house, you can check that out over on Patreon. All of the links to support me and my channel will be in the description below. I hope you have a safe and wonderful rest of your day. Happy holidays. Bye.